A child in ragged clothes saved a billionaire from an accident. He, once untouchable, was forced to see what he never wanted to see. And in searching for his savior, he found something money could never buy: purpose. If this beautiful story of overcoming and love interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. The sun was rising over Westwood Executive Airport as Richard Sterling adjusted the cuff of his Italian shirt and checked the gold Rolex on his wrist. At 45, he owned one of the largest executive aviation companies in the country, accustomed to having the world at his feet. That Tuesday morning, he was set to close the biggest deal of his career: 5 new jets for an American multinational, with a profit margin that would exceed all previous years combined. His cell phone vibrated incessantly as he walked toward the private hangar. On the other end of the line, his American lawyer confirmed the final details of the multi-million-dollar deal. Richard gestured in the air, speaking fluent English, mentally calculating the numbers that would make his company the absolute leader in the South American market. Dressed in an impeccable navy blue suit and handmade leather shoes, he radiated the power and confidence of a man who had never known defeat. The graying hair at his temples only accentuated his natural elegance, while his sunglasses hid eyes accustomed to seeing only business opportunities. His private jet awaited on the runway, gleaming in the morning light. It was his most precious jewel, a customized Embraer Legacy that had cost over $20 million. Richard sighed in satisfaction at the sight of it. In 2 hours, he would be in New York, signing contracts that would place him among the most influential businessmen in the country. That's when he heard the screams. A child's voice echoed through the quiet morning of the airport, desperate and shrill. Richard frowned, annoyed by the interruption, but continued his phone call. The negotiations were at a crucial point, and every minute was worth millions. The girl appeared, running from between the hangars, stumbling over her own feet. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, with disheveled brown hair and clothes that had once been blue, now faded and torn in several places. Her bare feet left marks on the tarmac, still damp with morning dew. The dirt on her face couldn't hide the desperate urgency in her brown eyes. "Sir, don't get on that plane," she shouted, running directly toward Richard. "Please, sir, don't go in there." Richard raised his free hand, making an impatient gesture for her to move away. On the phone, the American lawyer was starting to question the background noise, and he needed to maintain his focus. He turned his body, giving his back to the girl, trying to isolate himself from the commotion. "Sir, please listen to me." "The aircraft isn't safe," she insisted, pulling on the sleeve of his jacket. Richard pulled away sharply, looking with disdain at the dirty child who dared to touch his expensive clothes. He made a sharp gesture with his hand, indicating she should leave immediately. He had no time for childish games or beggars. Important business didn't wait. On the phone, the American lawyer asked about the final documentation. Richard resumed his professional tone, confirming that everything was in order for the signing. His steps were determined as he headed for the jet's staircase, where the flight attendant awaited him with a cordial smile. The girl didn't give up. She ran again, this time positioning herself directly in front of the boarding stairs. Her small hands trembled as she stretched out her arms, trying to physically block Richard's ascent. "There's something wrong with the plane, sir. I saw it." "I saw 2 men tampering with the fuel during the night," she yelled, tears beginning to stream down her dirty face. Richard paused for a moment, irritated beyond measure. He looked at the girl with a look of profound annoyance, as if she were just another obstacle on his path to success. On the phone, he needed to confirm details about bank transfers, and this situation was disrupting everything. "Get out of the way, girl. I have important commitments," he said dryly, trying to get around her. The flight attendant came down a few steps, preparing to intervene if it became necessary to physically remove the child. Richard nodded his head, indicating he wanted the situation resolved quickly. "Please, sir. My mother used to work here. She taught me about planes. There's something very wrong," the girl continued, her voice growing shriller with desperation. Richard hung up the phone abruptly, completely losing his patience. His dark eyes flashed with irritation as he faced the girl who dared to disrupt his plans. "Listen here, girl. I don't know who you are or how you got in here, but this is a private airport. You shouldn't be here. Now get out of the way before I call security." The girl took a few steps back, frightened by his harsh tone, but she didn't move from the spot. Her pleading eyes fixed on Richard's face, as if trying to convey all the urgency she felt through her gaze. "My name is Lily, sir. My mother's name was Sarah Collins. She worked for your company until last year. Please, just listen to me for 1 second." The name Sarah Collins echoed vaguely in Richard's memory, but he was too focused on his business to make any connection. He just shook his head and started to climb the jet stairs. It was at that moment that the pilot, Captain Mike Anderson, appeared at the cockpit door. He was a man in his 50s, with over 20,000 flight hours and an impeccable reputation. His usually calm face showed a worried expression. "Mr. Sterling, sorry to interrupt, but I'd like to have a quick word before takeoff." Richard stopped halfway up the stairs, already impatient with another delay. His phone buzzed again, but he decided to ignore it for now. "What is it, Mike?" "I'm in a hurry." During the pre-flight inspection, I noticed a strange odor near the fuel tanks. "It's not the usual smell of jet fuel, it's more chemical, different." Richard frowned. Captain Anderson never gave unnecessary warnings. In 15 years of flying his planes, he had never shown paranoia or exaggeration in safety matters. "Did you check everything? Are the systems normal?" "Yes, sir. All instruments indicate perfect operation, but my gut feeling..." "Well, sir, I don't feel comfortable taking off without investigating this odor further." Richard glanced at his watch. If he was delayed too long, he would miss the ideal window for closing the deal. The Americans were punctual and disliked unforeseen events. On the other hand, experience had taught him to trust the judgment of seasoned pilots. Down below, Lily remained standing near the stairs, watching the conversation intently. Her small fists were clenched, and she was biting her lower lip nervously. "How much time do you need to investigate?" Richard asked the pilot. "No more than 15 minutes, sir. We can drain a fuel sample and check for contamination." Richard took a deep breath, feeling a slight knot in his stomach. He looked down at Lily again, who was watching him with an expression between hope and fear. Something in her determined, childish gaze unsettled him in a strange way. "All right, Mike, do the check, but be quick." The pilot nodded and descended from the aircraft to coordinate with the maintenance team. Richard also came down, needing to reschedule some appointments by phone. He stood near the hangar, his back to the jet, discussing deadlines with his assistants in New York. Lily approached timidly, keeping a respectful distance, but without losing sight of the aircraft. "Sir, thank you for listening to the pilot." Richard didn't even look at her, focused on his calls. He was reorganizing his schedule when he heard the deafening roar. The world seemed to explode around him. A ball of orange fire completely engulfed the jet, followed by a wave of heat that threw them to the ground. Metal debris flew in all directions, shattering the windows of nearby hangars. Thick black smoke billowed into the sky, creating a sinister column that could be seen for miles. Richard was thrown backward by the impact, hitting the ground hard. His ears were ringing, and a sharp pain ran through his body. When he managed to lift his head, he saw only destruction where his most precious aircraft had once stood. Captain Anderson lay a few yards away, apparently injured but conscious. Airport staff were running in all directions, shouting instructions and calling for help. Sirens began to wail in the distance. Richard tried to stand, but his legs were shaking uncontrollably. His mind was slowly processing the reality. He was supposed to be inside that plane. He was supposed to have died in that explosion. With difficulty, he turned his head, looking for Lily. The girl was near a concrete pillar, sheltered from the shower of debris. When their eyes met, she began to cry silently, but not from fear. It was a cry of relief. Richard Sterling, the powerful businessman who moments before was calculating millions in profit, remained motionless on the airport tarmac, watching the smoke rise from his shattered dreams for the first time in decades. He had no idea what to do next. The next few hours passed in a blur of sirens, questioning, and paperwork. Richard was taken to the hospital for routine checkups, suffering only minor scrapes and a state of shock. Captain Anderson was even luckier, escaping with just a few scratches on his back, but both carried in their eyes the weight of having narrowly escaped a tragedy. The FBI immediately took over the investigation. The airport was sealed off, and experts began to analyze the still smoldering wreckage. Detective Frank Miller, an experienced man of 52, personally took charge of the case. He had investigated dozens of air accidents throughout his career, but something about this scene bothered him. "Mr. Sterling, I need you to tell me exactly what happened before the explosion," the detective said, sitting next to the gurney where Richard awaited his final medical results. Richard took a deep breath, still trying to organize his thoughts. The reality of what had happened was beginning to sink in, bringing alternating waves of relief and terror. "I was preparing to fly to New York. I had an important meeting, a multi-million-dollar contract. Everything was normal until a girl appeared, running and screaming for me not to board." "A girl?" The detective raised his eyebrows. "What girl?" "I don't know her full name. She said her name was Lily. Looked about 10 years old, torn clothes, very dirty. Looked like a street kid." "And what did she say exactly?" Richard closed his eyes, trying to remember the child's desperate words. At the time, he had completely ignored them, but now each word carried dramatic weight. "She said she had seen 2 men tampering with the fuel during the night. She said something was wrong with the plane. She mentioned her mother had worked for my company." The detective jotted down every detail carefully. "What's the mother's name?" "Sarah Collins, if I remember correctly. I'll check your company's employee records. Where is this girl now?" Richard frowned. After the explosion, in the midst of the chaos, he had lost sight of Lily. Firefighters, police, and onlookers had swarmed the area, and by the time he realized it, she was gone. "I don't know. After the explosion, I lost track of her. There was a lot of confusion." The detective nodded thoughtfully. "We'll need to find her. If she really saw someone tampering with the fuel, she's our primary witness." After being discharged from the hospital, Richard returned to his downtown penthouse but couldn't rest. He paced back and forth in the living room, replaying every moment of that morning. His sprawling 2,000-square-foot apartment with a panoramic city view had never felt so empty. He called his personal lawyer, David Vance, a meticulous man who had handled his business for 15 years. "David, I need you here now." 30 minutes later, the lawyer arrived, accompanied by Carol Morgan, the company's administrative director. Both were visibly shaken. News of the explosion was already circulating in the press, speculating about the cause of the accident. "Richard, thank God you're okay," Carol said, hugging him with genuine relief. "When I heard about the explosion, I thought the worst. It was a close call, Carol, a very close call." David adopted his usual professional tone. "Richard, the FBI has already requested access to all company records, maintenance, employees, suppliers. We need to prepare for an extensive investigation." Richard nodded, but his mind was focused on something else. "David, I need you to investigate a former employee named Sarah Collins. Apparently she worked with us until last year." "Sarah Collins," Carol repeated the name thoughtfully. "I remember her. She worked in the technical department, aircraft inspection. She was fired for... Let me remember. I think it was insubordination." "What do you mean insubordination?" "She constantly questioned company procedures, wrote detailed reports about supposed problems she found in the aircraft. She even suggested that some of our suppliers weren't reliable." Richard felt a chill run down his spine. "And what happened to those complaints?" Carol exchanged an uncomfortable glance with David before answering. "Well, the technical directorate reviewed them and concluded they were exaggerated concerns. Sarah was very, how can I put it, paranoid about safety. And she was fired for that? Not exactly. She started questioning direct orders, refusing to sign off on reports approving aircraft she considered inadequate. It created a tense work environment." David added, "Legally, the dismissal was for just cause. She was refusing to perform her duties as instructed by her supervision." Richard walked to the panoramic window, watching the city's movement below. Millions of people going about their normal routines, oblivious to the fact that he had escaped death by a matter of minutes. "I want all of Sarah Collins's records on my desk tomorrow morning. The report she made, correspondence, details of her dismissal, everything." "Richard, do you think there's a connection between Sarah and the explosion?" Carol asked with a worried expression. "I don't know, but her daughter saved my life today, and that can't be a coincidence." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony, drinking whiskey and trying to piece together the puzzle. If Sarah Collins had really identified safety problems in the company and had been fired for it, what kind of problems had she discovered? At 3 a.m., he received a call from Detective Miller. "Mr. Sterling, We have some preliminary information about the explosion. The experts found traces of an unidentified substance in the wreckage of the fuel tank. What kind of substance? They're still analyzing it, but it's definitely not jet fuel. It seems to have been added intentionally. Richard felt the confirmation of what he already suspected. So, it was sabotage? That's the most likely hypothesis. It means someone deliberately tried to cause the explosion. With you on board. The detective's words echoed in Richard's mind for the rest of the night. Someone had tried to kill him in a brutal and spectacular way. But who and why? The next morning, David arrived early with a folder full of documents about Sarah Collins. Richard examined them with growing attention. The woman's reports were meticulous, detailed, and disturbing. She had documented irregularities in spare parts, questioned the origin of imported components, and raised suspicions about the qualifications of some third-party technicians. In one particularly detailed report, Sarah mentioned serious safety risks due to the systematic use of uncertified components. Carol, did you know about all this? Richard asked, holding up the papers. I knew she wrote a lot of reports, but the technical directorate always assured me they were unfounded concerns. They said she didn't understand that some generic parts have the same quality as the original ones while costing much less. And who was the technical director at the time? Marcus Thorne. He left the company 6 months ago. Richard felt another chill run down his spine. Why did he leave? Carol hesitated before answering. There were some financial irregularities, accounts that didn't add up, suppliers we couldn't contact after the purchases were made. And you didn't tell me about this at the time. We thought it was best to handle it internally. We didn't want to bother you with operational details while you were focused on international expansions. Richard realized he had delegated too much trust to his team. While he was flying around the world closing multi-million-dollar deals, his own company was being undermined from within. David, I want you to find Marcus Thorne, and I want all financial records from the last 2 years reviewed by an external auditor. Richard, this could open a Pandora's box, the lawyer warned. The box has already been opened. David, someone tried to kill me yesterday, and I suspect the answer is somewhere in these papers. While David organized the documentation, Richard called Detective Miller directly. Detective, I need to know if you found the girl who warned me about the danger. Not yet, but we have a lead. A cleaning crew member said he saw a child hiding in one of the cargo trucks the night before the explosion. So it seems she spent the whole night at the airport. That confirms what she told me about seeing people tampering with the fuel. Exactly. We're reviewing all the security cameras, but we found something suspicious. The cameras in the cargo area were deactivated the night before. Richard felt a growing anger. Deactivated by whom? That's what we're investigating. Whoever did it knew exactly how the airport's security system works. Hanging up the phone, Richard was certain he was dealing with something much bigger than he had initially imagined. It wasn't an accident nor an impulsive act of revenge. It was an elaborate plan, executed by people who knew his routine and his company intimately. And at the center of it all was a 10-year-old girl, the daughter of an employee who had tried to report irregularities. A girl who had now disappeared again, carrying secrets that could reveal the whole truth behind the explosion that almost killed him. 3 days after the explosion, Richard was in his office reviewing contracts when the receptionist announced an unexpected visitor. Mr. Sterling, there's a journalist here who insists on speaking with you. She says she has information about the girl who warned you about the plane. Richard immediately looked up from the papers. Send her in. Rachel Price entered the room with firm steps and a confident posture. She was a woman in her early 30s, with black hair tied in an elegant bun, wearing a navy blazer and carrying a leather briefcase. Her dark eyes scanned the room with the sharp gaze of someone used to uncovering hidden truths. Mr. Sterling, I'm Rachel Price from the New York Chronicle. I specialize in corporate corruption investigations. Richard greeted her with a firm handshake, but maintained a cautious expression. Since the explosion, dozens of journalists had tried to contact him, but none had mentioned Lily specifically. You said you have information about the girl who warned me. How did you know? About her? Rachel sat in the armchair across from his mahogany desk. I've been tracking irregularities in the American aviation industry for 2 years. Sarah Collins's name came up several times in my investigations. Richard's heart quickened. You know Sarah Collins? I know her story. And I know where Lily is. Richard leaned forward, all his attention focused. Where is she? She's safe for now. But I need you to understand the full picture before anything else. Rachel opened her briefcase and took out several photographs and documents. Sarah Collins wasn't just a problematic employee at your company. She was a whistleblower. What do you mean? She contacted journalists, regulatory agencies, and even federal congressmen, trying to expose what she discovered working at your company. Use of uncertified parts, falsified maintenance reports, bribery of civil aviation inspectors. Richard felt as if the floor was disappearing beneath him. Those are very serious accusations. Do you have proof? Rachel spread photographs across the desk. They were images of airplane parts, documents with signatures and stamps, and spreadsheets with numbers Richard couldn't immediately decipher. These are copies of documents Sarah managed to get before she was fired. Look here, an invoice for parts supposedly imported from Germany, but the tracking code shows they actually came from a clandestine factory in China. And here, Rachel pointed to another document, an inspection report signed off, approving a turbine that, according to Sarah, had microfractures visible to the naked eye. Richard examined the papers with growing horror. If this was true, his company had put hundreds of lives at risk over the years. Why didn't Sarah come to me directly with this information? She tried. Rachel pulled another document from her briefcase. Here is a copy of the letter she sent to your office, requesting an urgent meeting with you. It was sent 3 weeks before she was fired. Richard took the letter and recognized his company's letterhead. He had never seen this document before. I never received this letter. I imagine not. Someone intercepted it. The question is, who had an interest in preventing you from knowing about these irregularities? Richard's mind raced through the possibilities. Carol David, the former technical director Marcus Thorne. How many people in his own company were involved? Ms. Price, where exactly is Lily now? She's being cared for by a Mrs. Gable, an elderly woman who lives in a low-income community on the outskirts of the city. Lily has been living on the street since Sarah disappeared, but Mrs. Gable took her in temporarily. Disappeared? What do you mean, disappeared? Rachel sighed deeply. Sarah knew she was in danger after making so many reports. In the last few months before she vanished, she was constantly receiving anonymous threats. Calls in the middle of the night, strange cars parked in front of her house, and nobody did anything to protect her. She went to the police several times, but they said there was no concrete evidence of a threat. Just silent calls, cars that drove away when she approached. Richard stood up and walked to the window, watching the city below. He felt a profound guilt for having completely ignored the warnings of a competent employee while blindly trusting people who might have been betraying his confidence. What happened to Sarah the night she disappeared? According to neighbors, she left home around 9 p.m. saying she had an important meeting. She took a small bag and told Lily she would be back the next morning. She was never seen again. Lily was alone for 2 weeks until the neighbors realized something was wrong. Social services tried to place her in a shelter, but she ran away. She's been living on the streets ever since. Richard turned to Rachel with a determined expression. I want to meet Lily. I want to hear from her exactly what she saw on the night of the sabotage. Rachel hesitated. Mr. Sterling, I need to warn you about something. Lily is traumatized. She lost her mother, has lived on the streets for months and witnessed what could have been a murder. It won't be easy to get information from her. I understand. But she saved my life. That's the least I can do. Rachel closed her briefcase and stood up. All right, but on one condition. I want exclusive rights to this entire story. If we can prove the corruption network in your company and find out who tried to kill you, I want to be the first to publish it. Richard extended his hand. Agreed. But I want the whole truth regardless of who gets hurt. They headed to Richard's car, a black BMW that contrasted violently with their destination. Rachel provided directions while explaining more details of her investigation. Mr. Sterling, how long has it been since you personally visited your company's hangars? Richard thought for a moment. A couple of years, maybe 3. I have a competent technical team for that. When was the last time you personally reviewed supplier contracts? Never. The purchasing department handles that under the supervision of the administrative directorate. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. It's exactly that operational distance that allowed the scheme to run for so long. They arrived at the community where Lily was being cared for. It was a shocking contrast to Richard's world. Simple houses, some with exposed brick, dirt roads, children playing with balls made of socks. Richard had never been in a place like this. His business took him to luxurious offices, five-star hotels, and international airports. This reality was completely foreign to him. Mrs. Gable was a woman in her 60s, with grey hair tied in a colourful scarf, wearing a simple but clean dress. She greeted Rachel with familiarity, but looked at Richard with a suspicious expression. "Is this the man from the plane?" she asked directly. "Yes, Mrs. Gable. This is Mr. Richard Sterling." The elderly woman examined him from head to toe, noticing the expensive suit, the gold watch, and the Italian shoes. "Lily's inside doing her homework, but she gets very scared when people talk about that night." Richard approached respectfully. "Mrs. Gable, I just want to thank her for saving me and see if I can help in any way." The woman's expression softened slightly. "Come in then, but go easy. She's very wary of men in suits." When Richard entered the small living room, Lily was sitting at a makeshift table, doing math exercises in a worn-out notebook. Seeing him, she shrank back in her chair but didn't run. "Hi, Lily, do you remember me?" She nodded slowly without fully lifting her eyes. "I want to thank you. If you hadn't warned me, I would have died on that plane." Lily finally looked directly at him. "Did you believe what I said?" Richard knelt to be at her eye level. "At the time I didn't, and I deeply regret it. You tried to save me and I ignored you. Why didn't you believe me?" Richard took a deep breath, searching for words a child could understand. "Because I was very busy with things I thought were important. Money, contracts, meetings. I forgot to pay attention to people." Lily studied him in silence for a few seconds, then spoke in a low voice. "I saw two men near your plane that night. They had a can and poured something into the fuel. Did you know these men?" "One of them. I'd seen him before. He used to visit my mom's company sometimes. Her tall, bald man with a scar on his face." Richard felt a shiver. The description could match several people, but there was something familiar about it. "Do you remember anything else about them?" "They were saying that after the plane exploded with you inside, everything would be easier, that there would be no one left to mess up their plans." Lily's words confirmed what Richard already suspected. It wasn't just sabotage, it was a premeditated murder attempt, and he was the specific target. Richard left the community with his mind reeling with suspicion. The description Lily had given of the bald man with a scar on his face deeply troubled him. He knew someone with those features, but needed to confirm it before making any accusations. On the way back, Rachel shared more information she had gathered over months of investigation. "Mr. Sterling, there's one name that constantly appears in the documents Sarah collected. Someone who authorized irregular purchases, approved dubious suppliers, and had access to the company's security systems." Richard looked at her as he drove. "What name?" "Marcus Thorne." Richard's stomach tightened. Marcus had been his technical director for 5 years, a person he had trusted completely. Tall, bald, with a visible scar on the left side of his face, the result of a motorcycle accident in his youth. "Rachel, I need you to help me locate Marcus Thorne. I have a feeling he's the key to all of this. I'm already working on it, but he completely vanished after leaving your company. Cancelled lease agreements, closed bank accounts, disappeared without a trace. That's not the normal behavior of someone who left over minor financial irregularities. It's the behavior of someone running from something very serious." Back in his office, Richard called an emergency meeting with Carol and David. He needed to confront them with the new information without revealing everything he had discovered. "Carol, I want you to tell me exactly why Marcus Thorne left the company." Carol exchanged a nervous glance with David before answering. "As I said before, there were financial irregularities, contracts with suppliers we couldn't contact after the purchases were made." "What kind of suppliers?" "Mainly spare parts and electronic components. Marcus said he had found international suppliers with very advantageous prices." "And did you verify the origin of these parts?" "We trusted his technical judgment. The parts came with all the necessary documentation, quality certificates." David added, "Legally, everything was in order. It was only later that we discovered some of the certificates were fake." A wave of anger grew inside Richard. And why wasn't I informed of any of this at the time? "Richard, you were closing the deal with the Argentine company. Then you had the negotiations in Mexico. We thought it could wait until you got back," Carol said defensively. "You thought it could wait? We're talking about fraud, about fake parts on planes that carry people." The silence in the room was heavy. David nervously shuffled his papers, while Carol avoided Richard's direct gaze. "Is there anything else you haven't told me?" Richard asked in a dangerously low voice. Carol took a deep breath. "Marcus had access codes to the hangar security system. When he left the company, we discovered he had copied information from the servers." "What kind of information?" "Your travel schedule, usual flight routes, aircraft maintenance schedules." Richard stood up abruptly, walking toward the window. It was all starting to make sense. Marcus had detailed information about his routine, access to the hangars, and the technical knowledge to sabotage an aircraft. "David, I want you to contact the FBI immediately with this information, and I want a full audit of every contract Marcus signed in the last 2 years." "Richard, this could seriously damage the company's reputation," David warned. "The company's reputation was already damaged the moment you allowed a criminal to operate freely for years." That afternoon, Richard received a call from Detective Miller with news on the investigation. "Mr. Sterling, our experts have completed the analysis of the substance found in the wreckage. They used concentrated hydrogen peroxide mixed with the fuel. It's an effective method for causing an explosion, but requires specific technical knowledge. Knowledge that an aviation technical director would certainly have." "Exactly. And we have more. The security cameras that were deactivated on the night of the sabotage could only be turned off with specific access codes. Codes that Marcus Thorne possessed. We're issuing a search and arrest warrant for him, but we need to find him first. Detective, I have an investigative journalist working with me on this case. She has information that might help." Richard passed Rachel's contact information to the detective and scheduled a meeting for the next day. He was beginning to understand the extent of the betrayal he had suffered. That night he couldn't eat. He stood on his apartment balcony, watching the city lights and reflecting on how many wrong decisions he had made. He had blindly trusted people who betrayed him, ignored important warnings, and almost paid for it with his life. The phone rang at 11 p.m. It was Rachel. "Mr. Sterling, I've located Marcus Thorne." "Where is he?" "In a downtown hotel using a fake name. My source at the reception desk confirmed his identity by the scar on his face." Richard felt adrenaline course through his body. "I'm contacting the police immediately." "Wait, there's more. He's not alone. He's staying with another man my source recognized as a former civil aviation official, someone with the power to approve or fail safety inspections." The corruption network was even larger than he had imagined. It wasn't just a dishonest ex-employee, but an organized scheme involving government inspectors. "Rachel, this is dangerous. Let's let the police take it from here." "I agree. But there's something I found out that I need to tell you in person." "About Sarah Collins." "What about her?" "She's alive." Richard almost dropped the phone. "What do you mean, alive?" "She didn't disappear voluntarily. She was kidnapped and held captive for months. She managed to escape 3 weeks ago and is in hiding, afraid of being found again." "Where is she?" "In a safe place, under the protection of people who specialize in protecting whistleblowers. She has definitive proof against Marcus and the entire corruption network." Richard felt a mix of relief and urgency. "I need to speak with her. She'll only agree to meet in a neutral location with security guarantees. And there's one condition." "What condition?" "She wants to see Lily before anything else. She's desperate to be reunited with her daughter." The next day, Rachel arranged a meeting in a discreet restaurant downtown. Richard arrived accompanied by Detective Miller, while Rachel brought a woman of about 40, with short brown hair, wearing glasses and simple clothes. Sarah Collins was visibly thin and had a haunted look, but her eyes lit up when Rachel mentioned that Lily was safe. "Is she okay? How did she manage to survive all this time alone?" Sarah asked, her eyes filled with tears. Richard felt a pang in his chest seeing the mother's suffering. "She's a brave and intelligent girl. She saved me from dying in the explosion that Marcus caused." Sarah turned to him with an expression of gratitude and pain. Mr. Sterling, I tried to warn you about the irregularities in the company. I sent reports, requested meetings, I tried in every way I could. I know, and I deeply regret not listening to you. I trusted the wrong people. Sarah opened a small backpack and took out a flash drive. Here is all the evidence I managed to gather before I was kidnapped. Fake contracts, records of irregular payments, recordings of incriminating conversations. The detective took the flash drive immediately. What kind of recordings? Conversations between Marcus and civil aviation inspectors, arranging the approval of aircraft in exchange for payments, and conversations with other people, planning to get rid of anyone who could harm the scheme. Richard swallowed hard. He was planning to kill me? For how long? Sarah hesitated before answering. Since you started pushing for more transparency in contracts, Marcus knew that sooner or later you would discover the irregularities. So the plan was to kill me and take control of the company. Actually, no. Sarah looked directly into Richard's eyes. The plan was for your death to look like an accident, so the company could be sold quickly by your heirs. Marcus had already negotiated the sale with a foreign group that wouldn't ask too many questions about past irregularities. Detective Miller took quick notes. Sarah, would you be willing to testify formally against them? Yes, as long as you guarantee protection for me and Lily. Richard leaned forward. Sarah, I want you to know that I will do everything in my power to make up for the mistakes I made, starting with reuniting you with your daughter. The reunion between Sarah and Lily took place at Mrs. Gable's house under discreet police supervision. Richard watched from a distance as mother and daughter embraced after months of forced separation. Their tears touched his heart deeply, making him reflect on the true value of human relationships. Mummy, I thought you were gone forever, Lily sobbed, clinging to her mother's neck. Never, my daughter, I would never abandon you. Bad people kept me from coming back, but we're together again now. Richard approached the group respectfully. Sarah, Lily, I want you to know that I will do everything in my power to ensure nothing bad ever happens to you again. Sarah looked up, her eyes red from crying. Mr. Sterling, I know it's not directly your fault, but your company almost destroyed our family. I know, and I take full responsibility for allowing that to happen. In the following days, the FBI intensified its investigation based on the evidence provided by Sarah. The flash drive contained explosive recordings that implicated not only Marcus Thorne but a network of corruption involving government inspectors, fraudulent suppliers, and even other businessmen in the aviation sector. Detective Miller contacted Richard with a risky proposal. Mr. Sterling, we want you to help lure Marcus into a trap. We know he's still in the city and is likely planning another attempt on your life. What do you mean? A trap? We want you to arrange a meeting with him, pretending you've only discovered part of the scheme and are willing to negotiate for his silence. That's extremely dangerous. We'll be monitoring everything closely. It's the only way to arrest him in the act, with irrefutable proof of his criminal intentions. Richard agreed to participate in the operation, motivated by both a sense of justice and the need to protect Sarah and Lily for good. Rachel helped establish contact with Marcus through intermediaries. The plan was simple. Richard would pretend to have discovered basic financial irregularities and would be willing to accept a partnership proposal in exchange for his silence. The meeting was set for an abandoned warehouse in the industrial zone. Richard arrived at the location, wearing a bulletproof vest under his suit, with hidden audio and video devices. Police teams were strategically positioned around the building. Marcus Thorne looked different. He had lost weight. His hair was grayer and his eyes had a desperate look. He was accompanied by the other man Richard recognized from the photos Rachel had shown him, Oscar Martin, a former civil aviation inspector. Richard, good to see you alive, Marcus said with a forced smile. I heard about the accident with your plane. What a terrible thing. Richard maintained a neutral expression following the detective's instructions. It was more than an accident, Marcus. It was sabotage. Marcus exchanged a quick glance with Oscar. Sabotage? What do you mean? Found evidence of fuel tampering, and I discovered you had access to the hangars the night before the explosion. The former technical director's demeanor changed completely. The fake smile vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. Richard, you were always so naive. You believed everything they told you, never questioned anything. I trusted you for years, and you betrayed me in the worst possible way." Marcus walked slowly around Richard, like a predator sizing up its prey. "Betrayed you? I saved your company from bankruptcy. All those advantageous contracts, all those savings on spare parts. You were living in a fool's paradise. Savings that put lives at risk, fake parts that could cause accidents." Oscar finally spoke. "Mr. Sterling, accidents happen in aviation. The important thing is that there were never any investigations that harmed your company, because you bribed inspectors to approve planes that shouldn't have been flying." Marcus stopped directly in front of Richard. "Let's stop pretending, Richard. I know you've discovered much more than you're letting on. The question is, what do you want in exchange for your silence?" Richard took a deep breath, following the agreed-upon script. "I want a partnership in the company. 50% of future profits in exchange for forgetting everything I've discovered." Marcus laughed sarcastically. "Do you really think I'm going to accept blackmail from you? It's not blackmail, it's a business proposal." The ex-director moved dangerously close. "Richard, 2 weeks ago you were supposed to die on that plane. It was a mistake to let a little street girl get in the way of our plans. So you admit you tried to murder me?" "I didn't just try. I'm going to try again, only this time there won't be any inconvenient witnesses." Marcus signaled to Oscar, who pulled a pistol from his jacket. Richard's heart pounded, but he knew he had to keep the conversation going to give the police time to act. "Marcus, if you kill me now, you'll never be able to control the company. There are too many people involved in the investigation. That's exactly why you need to disappear. Your death will end all investigations, and your company will be sold quickly to our international partners." "What partners?" "A Colombian cartel interested in using your company's infrastructure to transport special products." Richard felt nauseous as he realized his company had almost become a tool for international trafficking. It was at that moment that he heard the unmistakable sound of approaching sirens. Oscar raised the gun toward Richard, but before he could fire, the warehouse doors were simultaneously breached by FBI teams. "FBI, drop your weapons, hands up." The shootout lasted only a few seconds. Oscar tried to resist and was shot in the leg by the officers. Marcus tried to flee through the back of the warehouse, but was intercepted by another team waiting outside. Richard was quickly removed from the scene by agents, unharmed but deeply shaken by the experience. The entire conversation had been recorded, providing irrefutable proof of their crimes. At the hospital, where Oscar was taken for his leg wound, Detective Miller informed Richard about the operation's outcome. "We have enough evidence to prosecute not only Marcus and Oscar, but the entire corruption network. The scheme involved at least 5 companies in the aviation sector and 10 government inspectors." "And what about the international contracts they mentioned?" "We've already alerted Interpol. The Colombian cartel that intended to use your company is under investigation for international drug trafficking." Richard felt sickened, realizing how close he had come to unwittingly becoming part of a criminal operation of international dimensions. "Detective, what happens now with my company?" "There will be a full investigation, but since you actively cooperated with the justice system and were a victim of the scheme, there will be no charges against you personally." Even so, Richard knew his company would never be the same. The market's trust had been shattered, and he would have to rebuild everything from the ground up. That evening, he visited Sarah and Lily at Mrs. Gable's house. The two were watching television, following the news about Marcus's arrest and the dismantling of the corruption network. "Mr. Richard!" Lily exclaimed when she saw him enter. "I saw on TV that they arrested the bald man I saw at the airport." "That's right, Lily. Thanks to your courage, we were able to stop some very dangerous people." Sarah stood up to greet him. "Mr. Sterling, I don't know how to thank you. You risked your life to help us." Richard sat next to them on the simple sofa. "Actually, you two are the ones who helped me. You helped me discover the truth about my own company. So what will happen to the company now?" Sarah asked. Richard sighed deeply. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe this is for the best. Maybe it's time to start over the right way." Lily looked at him with childish curiosity. "Mr. Richard, will you be sad if you lose all your money?" Richard smiled for the first time in weeks. "You know, Lily, I've discovered that there are things much more important than money, like having people who truly care about you." Sarah and Mrs. Gable exchanged understanding glances. Richard was beginning to learn lessons that money and power had never taught him. 6 months after Marcus Thorne's arrest, Richard was unrecognizable. Sitting in a plastic chair at the small community school, he watched Lily present her science project on the importance of aviation safety. The girl, now with well-groomed hair and a clean school uniform, spoke with authority about airplane engines and safety systems. Richard's life had changed drastically. After months of investigations, audits, and legal proceedings, he had decided to sell what was left of his aviation company. The corruption scandal had destroyed his reputation in the industry, but it had also freed him from a life he now realized had been empty and without real purpose. With the money from the sale, he had created the Sarah Collins Aviation Safety Institute, a non-profit organization dedicated to overseeing the aviation industry and protecting whistleblowers. Sarah had become the institute's technical director, finally able to use her knowledge for the common good. Richard now lived in a simple 2-bedroom apartment in the same neighborhood where Lily and Sarah lived. He had traded his Italian suits for polo shirts and jeans, his BMW for a standard car, and 5-star restaurants for Mrs. Gable's home-cooked meals. "My friends," Lily said from the school's improvised stage, "it's very important that people tell the truth about safety problems. My mom always taught me that saving lives is more important than making money." In the audience, made up of parents and grandparents from the community, Richard smiled discreetly. Lily didn't mention her story directly, but her words carried the weight of her experience. "When we finish our work," the girl continued, holding a cardboard model of an airplane, "we should always think, did we do our best to protect people?" After the presentations, Richard approached the stage to congratulate Lily. "Congratulations, Professor. Your presentation was better than many keynotes I've heard at international conferences." Lily laughed, still a bit shy with compliments. "Mr. Richard, Ms. Rachel said my story is going to be a book. It's true. Rachel is finishing writing about everything that happened. Your courage will inspire many people." Sarah approached, carrying a small merit award that Lily had won for the project. "Richard, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for us." "Sarah, you too saved my life, literally and figuratively." "Figuratively? How so?" Richard looked around the simple school, watching the children play in the dirt courtyard, the colorful handmade murals, the genuine joy on the faces of the simple people who were now part of his life. "Before I met you, I lived in a gilded cage. I had a lot of money, but I didn't have a real life. I didn't have people who truly cared about me." Mrs. Gable, who had joined the group, interjected with her natural wisdom. "Mr. Richard, money is like salt in food. A little bit adds flavor, but too much spoils everything." Richard laughed genuinely. Mrs. Gable always had these comparisons that explained life better than any philosophy book he had ever read. That afternoon, they walked together through the community streets. Richard now knew every family, every story, every daily struggle of the people who lived there. He had become a constant presence, helping with school supplies, organizing job training workshops, simply being there when someone needed him. "Mr. Richard, can I ask you a question?" Lily said, kicking a stone on the path. "Of course, you can ask anything." "Do you miss your old life? The planes, the money, the trips?" Richard stopped walking and knelt to her eye level, just as he had the first day they had a serious conversation. "You know, Lily, I thought those things made me happy, but I discovered I was confusing pleasure with happiness. What's the difference? Pleasure is when you buy something expensive or travel to a beautiful place. It lasts for a short time, and then you need to buy something else or travel somewhere else. Happiness is when you wake up in the morning and know you have people who truly care about you. And are you happy now?" Richard looked around, seeing Sarah chatting animatedly with other mothers about the Institute's upcoming projects. Mrs. Gable organizing the children for a group snack, neighbors greeting him with genuine smiles. "I'm happier than I have ever been. Lily. My real name is Lily Ann Santos. Or you can just call me Lily like my friends do." Richard smiled. "So can I consider myself your friend?" Of course you can. But can I ask you something too?" "You can. If I need a stand-in dad for a school party or a parent-teacher meeting, can you be it?" Richard felt his eyes well up. A child's simple question had touched a part of his heart he didn't even know existed. "It would be an honor, Lily." That evening, Richard had dinner at Sarah and Lily's house as he did 3 times a week. It was a routine that had been established naturally, without formal invitations or obligations. It just happened, like the best things in life. During the meal, Sarah commented on the Institute's progress. "Richard, we received 5 more reports this week. Pilots reporting pressure to fly aircraft in inadequate conditions, technicians being forced to approve superficial maintenance. It's important work. How many lives can we save by preventing other Marcuses from operating out there?" Rachel is publishing the full story on our case next week. That should encourage more people to report irregularities. Lily, who was doing homework at the dinner table, looked up from her notebook. "Mum, when I grow up, I want to work at the Institute too, to help people like you helped us." Sarah stroked her daughter's hair tenderly. "And when you grow up, the Institute will be even bigger and more important." Richard watched the scene with a warm heart. That simple table, with mismatched plates and home-cooked food, was worth more than all the dinners in 5-star restaurants he had ever attended. After dinner, he helped Lily with her math exercises, while Sarah organized documents from the Institute. The domestic routine, which would have once seemed tedious, had now become precious. "Mr. Richard, at the school fair, they're going to have a father-daughter square dance. Will you dance with me?" Richard laughed, imagining himself dressed in a country-style outfit, square dancing at a public school fair. "Of course, Lily, but you'll have to teach me the steps. It's been a long time since I've square danced. Mom can teach you. She's a really good dancer." Sarah laughed at the conversation between them. "Richard, I don't think you know what you're getting into. School square dancing is serious business here in the community. I'm ready for any challenge." Later, when Lily was already asleep, Richard and Sarah talked on the small apartment balcony, watching the neighborhood's nightlife. "Sarah, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Do you resent me for everything that happened? For being so negligent with my own company?" Sarah was silent for a few moments before answering. "At first I did. When I was held captive, I thought a lot about how you had ignored my reports, how you had trusted the wrong people. But then I understood that you were a victim too." "How so?" "Marcus manipulated you for years. You trusted him, and he used that trust to harm you. In a way, we are all victims of dishonest people. Even so, I should have paid more attention. Richard, what matters isn't what you did in the past, but what you're doing now. How many wealthy businessmen would be willing to give up everything to help a former employee and her daughter? I didn't do it to be a good guy. I did it because I discovered that you two are more important to me than any business." Sarah smiled. "That's exactly why Lily sees you as a father figure. You are truly present in her life." 3 months later, at the school fair, Richard was square dancing, dressed in a checkered shirt and a straw hat, spinning Lily, who wore a colorful country dress made by Mrs. Gable. The entire community applauded, and he felt more fulfilled than at any sophisticated social event he had ever attended. During the dance, he saw Rachel taking pictures for the book she was writing. Detective Miller was also there with his family, celebrating the success of the operation that had dismantled one of the largest corruption networks in American aviation. When the music ended, Lily hugged him tightly. "Mr. Richard, thank you for being my stand-in dad today." Richard lifted her into his arms, spinning her in the air as she laughed loudly. "Lily, I'm not your stand-in dad. I'm your friend forever." The girl looked him in the eyes with childish seriousness. "Friend forever? Even when I grow up and become an adult?" "Friend forever, I promise." That night, back in his simple apartment, Richard sat on the balcony watching the stars. He thought about how life had come full circle. He had lost millions of dollars, an international company, social status, and power. In return, he had gained a family, a true purpose, and an inner peace that no amount of money could buy. The phone rang. It was an international call from a former American client, offering him a partnership in a new aviation venture. "Thank you for the offer, but I'm no longer interested. I found something much more important to do with my life." He hung up the phone and went back to contemplating the stars. In the next apartment, he could hear Sarah singing softly to put Lily to sleep, a simple song that was worth more than all the classical music he used to listen to at expensive concerts. Richard Sterling had learned to truly fly, not in the skies with private jets, but in real life with his feet on the ground and his heart in the clouds. And he discovered that this was the only kind of flight that truly mattered. A gentle breeze swayed the window curtains, bringing the scent of a home-cooked dinner and the sound of children playing in the courtyard. He smiled, closing his eyes and feeling truly at home for the first time in his life. The girl who had once run desperately to save him from an explosion had ended up saving much more than his life. She had saved his soul. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Richard, Sarah, and Lily has touched your hearts deeply. This narrative about second chances, found family, and the true wealth of life teaches us that sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what truly matters. To continue this emotional journey with us, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories that explore the most precious human bonds. You can find it by clicking here on the side. If this story moved you as much as it moved us to tell it, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Every day we bring unique narratives that celebrate the complexity and beauty of the human experience. Don't miss our upcoming content, and let us know in the comments which moment stood out to you the most.